My grandpa Vova was a recluse and a heavy alcoholic. He didn't drink with buddies, he just stocked up on booze at the nearest store, returned to his lonely apartment, and spent another drunk day, losing track of hours and days in an acrid stupor. He didn't pile up utility debts, could save on food, his fridge was often empty, but 2 or 3 bottles on the table, that was an essential part of life. The old man was past 80 and still drinking like a young man. All the neighbors worried about him, and their concern was quite justified. They were afraid he'd die locked in, and they wouldn't notice. So if anything seemed off, they called me, his only close relative still in contact. The main overseer, Aunt Nadia, called me at least twice a week. "Hello. Hi, Dim, your grandpa's not answering again." I knock, but he doesn't hear, said Aunt Nadia. "Damn, I'll come over now," I promised. We lived on neighboring streets. It was a 10-minute walk to him. This happened many times, and it always turned out that the old man just drank himself into a blackout and was sleeping. But I couldn't not check. I knew every visit to him could be the last. It was always nerve-wracking to turn the key in the lock. "Grandpa, are you alive?" I entered the smoky apartment, that familiar musty little world of a burned-out alcoholic with yellow wallpaper and reddish ceilings from cheap tobacco, decade-old cobwebs in the corners, and piles of old rags everywhere. My grandpa was lying on the worn-out carpet in the living room, a half-finished bottle at his feet. He mumbled, opening his eyes. I sighed with relief. "Phew, alive." And Grandpa shook his hand and said, "Doesn't feel like just drunk." I crouched down and looked into his cloudy eyes. "Grandpa, can't you talk?" Just what I needed. I was shaking in my knees, thought he'd had a stroke, now I'd have to care for a bedridden man. I called an ambulance. While waiting, I kept pestering Grandpa, trying to get a word out of him, but he barely moved his pale lips and moaned. Soon a calm and businesslike guy in a blue uniform arrived. Took one look at the old drunk and said, "Aha," then slowly dug into his med kit. Then, slap. A shot for Grandpa, and his eyes cleared up immediately. A few minutes later the old man smiled and said, "Oh, that's better. Thank you, doctor, I thought I was a goner. What happened to him?" I was in shock. Didn't expect my relative to be fixed so easily after such a blackout. "Nothing," the paramedic replied, closing the kit, "drank without eating, sugar dropped. I gave him a glucose shot, and he's fine. Until next time." "You're not planning to change your habits, right, Vladimir Viktorovich?" He said it more as a statement than a question. "Why should I?" Grandpa was already sitting frog-legged on the carpet, eyeing the unfinished bottle. "Let me live as I want in my final years. The wife nagged me all my life, never let me drink in peace. Now I'm my own boss." I scolded him. "Ever since Grandma died, you've been going all out, never sober. That's just wrong." "I have a legal right," the old man muttered, seeing off the paramedic. I automatically said, "Sorry." He just nodded understandingly. For him, it wasn't a big deal. How many alcoholics had he revived each shift? He was used to it. Another routine case. Grandpa raised the alarm again. Neighbors, me, ambulance, made everyone worry, I grumbled. "Who asked you to fuss?" The old man scratched his unshaven cheek with total indifference. "You all hover around me. That's your thanks for being pulled back from the brink," I hissed. The old man waved his hand. "Oh, stop yapping. I haven't been to the afterlife, just felt a little dizzy." "Shame, could have told you if there's anything interesting there." I brought a trash bag from the kitchen and started packing empty bottles. The clinking of glass filled the silence of the smoky and gloomy room. "We'll all end up there," the old man said quietly after a long silence. That reminded me of an interesting thing. There's a phenomenon where friends or relatives make a kind of pact. Whoever dies first will try to send a message from the afterlife. And I proposed this to my grandpa. Grandpa, seriously, let's make a deal. If you ever die, which I doubt, of course, give me a sign from there. I'm curious if there's something or not. Grandpa Vova immediately agreed. Fine, I'll give you a sign, in the form of a slap on the back of the head. I'll go buy you something to eat, I said. And you, don't drink today. All right. Buy me some sausages, the grandpa demanded. The cheapest ones, don't get expensive ones. He was such a miser, he even saved my money, a truly amazing guy. I knew his time would come someday, he couldn't stay locked up forever. But it seemed it wouldn't happen in the coming month or even this year, but sometime far away in the future. And then, a couple of weeks later, I had a nightmare. It was so realistic that I jumped up, though you couldn't even call it a dream, just a split-second vision, a flash of horror. I saw for a moment my grandpa's frightened face. He looked at me with wide-open eyes and shouted, "Dima." I woke up with a shiver and sat up in bed, horror, my heart pounding like mad. After that, I had a bad feeling I couldn't shake. I wanted to go check on Grandpa, but he didn't like uninvited visits, so I just waited for the neighbor to get worried again. My anxiety grew by the hour. I thought, if something happens, Aunt Nadia will be the first to notice. She hadn't called, so I decided to call her myself. "Hello," the woman answered. "Hi, Aunt Nadia," I began awkwardly. "Haven't heard anything about Grandpa for a while, have you stopped by him?" "I haven't," she answered. "When was the last time you were there?" "He hasn't been around in a while, and I got busy with my own stuff and forgot about him." A chill spread through my chest. I hung up and ran to the next street. Aunt Nadia was already standing at the building entrance, her face full of worry. I quickly went up to the second floor, my heart like stone as I turned the key in the lock. The apartment smelled of tobacco, but it was an old, stale smell, not fresh smoke. Beyond the threshold, complete silence, oppressive and unfamiliar. Not feeling the floor under my feet, I walked into the living room and froze in the doorway. Grandpa was lying on his back with his mouth open. His skin was gray, like cigarette ash. Life had completely left that body. "Well, how is he?" the neighbor asked impatiently from the stairwell. "Dead," I replied, not believing it myself. "Dead," Aunt Nadia's voice changed. And indeed, my grandpa, who didn't seem to care about anything, had departed this life. What a life he had, locked in four walls, didn't even read books, didn't watch TV, didn't listen to the radio. He drank cheap vodka to forget. What did he even think about? Maybe he was just biding time, waiting for his lonely, alcohol-soaked life to finally end. The medics later said Grandpa had been dead for 2 days. Oddly, there was no smell at all. Because he was all pickled in alcohol, I thought jokingly. And wouldn't you know it, exactly 2 days ago, he appeared to me in a mini nightmare. Could it be his frightened spirit came to me, just as he had promised? When the body was taken away, I felt very sad. I had never seen that old apartment without Grandpa, it now felt impossibly empty. First Grandma was gone, now he was too. Such a sad, yet natural end. Vovka, drank away his whole life, sighed the neighbor, then asked, "Are you the heir to the apartment?" Her tone was full of curiosity. "I guess so, I hadn't even thought about that." The thought stunned me. But yes, the apartment was now mine, and it was much roomier than the studio I was living in. That slightly dulled my pain, an unexpected comfort in grief. I looked around. I could clean this place up, get rid of all the junk, renovate. But that's for later. First, Grandpa's funeral. Everything had to be done properly, with respect to his memory. I had to run around, get everything arranged. Luckily, I didn't have to find a cemetery spot. Naturally, he should be buried next to Grandma. 2 days passed in a blur. The day before the burial, I decided to clean up the apartment a bit, not to move in right away, but just because. Why keep all that trash? The space should be clean. Grandpa's apartment had 2 rooms, one small one with a wardrobe and an old bed no one had used since Grandma died, and the living room, with a sofa, rug, and cabinet with crystal dishes. Everything else was junk: bottles, bags, racks, old boots, and felt shoes. It could all go straight to the trash, clear space for repairs. It took me the whole day to bag and carry out the useless stuff. It was hard work. When it got dark outside, I decided to leave and continue another day. I turned off the light in the living room, and suddenly a quiet voice came from somewhere. "Haven't even buried me yet, and the grandson is already playing master." I definitely heard it, a raspy, muffled grumble. Not in the apartment itself, but as if from behind the wall. And in response, someone muttered unclearly. Some creepy mumbling. To hear it better, I moved closer to the wall where the cabinet stood. The voices were coming exactly from there. "The burial's tomorrow." "Still in the morgue," someone said behind the wall. My heart sank. That grumbling sounded just like my Grandpa Vover. And such a strange phrase. Who alive would say they're still in the morgue? Only some lunatic, or someone dead. It seemed I had accidentally overheard a conversation between 2 dead people, my grandpa and someone else. Were they still living in this house? Scary to even think. My mind refused to believe it. Everything fell silent. I quickly went to the hallway, turned on the light, gathered my things, and left. I wanted to get out of that place as soon as possible. Grandpa was brought from the morgue at 11 a.m. to the Latvian gates. At the funeral were elderly relatives and neighbors. Only one woman cried, Aunt Nadia, who wasn't even a real relative. And even she was probably crying out of politeness, just a ritual. At old people's funerals, people rarely cry loudly. It's the young that everyone feels sorry for, while old folks are expected to die. That's the unspoken rule. I think I was the saddest one among the mourners. Grandpa and I were connected only by blood, not common interests, yet the feeling of irreplaceable loss pierced my soul. He was a likable character, despite his flaws. His absence was deeply felt. Right before the coffin was closed, I looked at the old man's face and quietly said, "Goodbye, Grandpa Vover. I hope it's good for you there. Rest in peace, and thank you for everything." I thought I'd gotten enough signs that the afterlife exists. First, the death premonition in the form of a short dream, then, voices in the dark. These signs disturb me. Skeptics will say, "So what, you imagined it." I might have forgotten about it over time, but something happened soon after that shook me to the core. A few days after the funeral, I went back to Grandpa's apartment. I planned to gradually get rid of everything unnecessary, sort through the papers, and maybe even start tidying up for a future renovation. I didn't really want to live there, but the idea of having my own 2-room apartment was appealing. The neighbor lady brought me a whole bunch of keys. These were in the hallway, on the shelf where he kept his caps. "You should go down to the basement too, take a look. He used to keep all sorts of junk down there." Great, I thought. The apartment's already full of crap, now there's more in the basement. But I didn't argue, I took the keys. The basement door, as it turned out, was old and rusty. I had to yank it pretty hard for it to finally creak open. A wave of damp, earthy air hit me in the face. I clicked on the flashlight on my phone and stepped inside. The basement was divided into sections, one for each apartment. Grandpa's was in the far left corner, blocked by a wooden partition and a flimsy door with a padlock. I opened it and took a look around. Inside, total chaos, cardboard boxes, a broken armchair, a suitcase, some old jars. The smell of mold, wet concrete, and dust was so strong it made my eyes water. I stared into the darkness, my pulse racing. Why would Grandpa need a hidden basement under the basement? I wondered. Against my better judgment, I started climbing down. The ladder was slippery and ancient. I carefully descended, gripping each rung tightly. Finally, I reached the bottom. My flashlight flickered, the battery was running low. I quickly scanned the space. It was a room. A small underground chamber, like a cell, with stone walls and a dirt floor. In the center, a wooden table and 2 chairs. On the table, 2 glasses and a half-empty bottle of vodka. But the thing that froze me in place was what was sitting in one of the chairs. It was Grandpa. He was sitting there, hunched over, glass in hand, his face lifeless and pale. Exactly like the day I found him. But how? Then I heard a raspy chuckle. Well, grandson, figured it out yet? The voice came from behind me. I turned around. In the shadows stood another figure, thin, tall, completely gray. No eyes, just dark sockets. It stepped forward and whispered, "He's mine now." I don't remember how I got out of there. I just remember screaming and running, scraping my hands raw on the ladder, bursting out of the basement, and slamming the door behind me. I haven't been back to that apartment since. I'm thinking of selling it, if anyone will take it. Grandpa Volver, it turns out, hadn't been waiting for death. He'd been hiding something much, much worse. It stepped forward and whispered, "He's mine now." I don't remember how I got out of there. I just remember screaming and running, scraping my hands raw on the ladder, bursting out of the basement, and slamming the door behind me. I haven't been back to that apartment since. I'm thinking of selling it, if anyone will take it. Grandpa Volver, it turns out, hadn't been waiting for death. He'd been hiding something much, much worse.